the legend that blessed the entire earth. He breathed the sacred lines and a whole nation preceded him, Alexander the Great of comedy. But is there more than what meets the eye? In this video, we go through the roots of this great tree to understand and unveil its fruits and most importantly, what it brought to this world. George Carlin was born in 1937, the 12th of May, in the magnificent city of New York. This was during the beginning of the Second World War as the Japanese invaded China in a brutal and cruel full-scale invasion. Even though Carlin was totally against religion, considered the epitome of blasphemy, he knew that his birth was an act of God, for Mother Nature did all that she could for him to never walk this earth. During a huge separation between his parents, just like a Hollywood scene, his mother and father met on the streets of New York. A one-night stand shook the earth to its core, as the unexpected event was the conceivement of Carlin, the greatest comedian of all time. Moreover, the pregnancy was unwanted. As if things could not get any worse, this was not even the tip of the iceberg. Just after 2 months, Carlin's mother was in Dr. Sunshine's office, and she was not there for a medical abortion. She was there for a surgical procedure, D&C, also known as dilation and curettage. And frankly speaking, the procedure is equivalent to pulling the baby out and throwing it to the trash can. In this procedure, the doctor widely opens the vagina using a vagina speculum, gains access to the cervix and scrape out pregnancy tissue, and within 10 minutes, down the drains, Carlin would have been. As the doctor sterilized the equipment and put on her gloves, commenting with what would be the assassination of the stand-up comedy king, one in which would be legal and change the course of the world as we know it. Carlin's mother had a vision. She saw Carlin's grandmother, who had died 6 months ago, on a picture hung on the office wall. At the drop of a hat, she told Carlin's father, "Let's get out of here, pet. I'm gonna have this kid." Because of her strong Catholic beliefs, she did not hesitate to take that as an inexorable sign from above. Carlin's father, John Carlin, had a successful vocation. He was the advertising manager of the New York Sun, which was known for its late 1800s quote, which says, "When a dog bites a man, that is not news, because it happens so often, but if a man bites a dog, that is news." Carlin's father was once the leading salesman in the United States for 3 years. Surprisingly, John was not a good father to Carlin. He was a drunk and an abuser. He abused his ex-wife, which led to her death due to a heart attack. He would also beat his own son, Carlin's older brother, Patrick. To little Carlin, that created a tragic childhood experience which tremendously affected his future.
Here we go. In the 1930s and 1940s, my father sold newspaper advertising space and was consistently one of the top 2 or 3 space salesmen in the country by actual lineage count. He began at the old Philadelphia American, moved to the Bulletin, and ended his career as the national advertising manager of the New York Sun. He also put in some time at the New York Post when it was still a broadsheet, or as my mother used to say, when it was a real newspaper, not a commie rag.
However, it is said that Carlin's father had only laid a hand on Carlin's mother once, owing to the fact that her father was a cop and she had 4 brothers. Carlin's mother is the hero in this story. She was a secretary to the Association of the National Advertisers. She was tough, strict, amusing, and had an appreciation of the English language, which George clearly picked up and used as a theme later on in a vast amount of his performances. When Carlin was only 2 months, his mother ran away from his father through the fire escape with him and his brother Patrick. Thereafter, she kept moving to different places until she found a place where he will never find them. Carlin said that his mother was afraid of his father, as her whole body will shake when a stranger knocks at the door. George's father later died when Carlin was only 8 years old. She raised both George and his brother as a single mother, and to her this wasn't a piece of cake. Later on, her toughness and strictness would influence Carlin to be defiant through his teenage years and also shape his adulthood. George was in tune with his brother Pat. You can say that they were even closer than the most identical twins. They had similar perspectives. They are both anti-religious, anti-governmental, and also think that the human race has failed as a species. Patrick once said, "What we should do is to take all the mentally defective people in this country and give them government jobs and just sit back and watch things improve." This is a joke that George himself also used in his performances. George also talks about the fact that all these climate change issues and natural disasters are not here to end the earth, but to wipe out the human race.
And that was, I sort of gave up on the human race and gave up on the American dream and culture and nation, and decided that I didn't care about the outcome.
Not caring about the outcome. What do you mean by that?
Not having an emotional stake in whether this experiment with human beings works. I really don't care. I love people as I meet them one by one. People are just wonderful as individuals. You see the whole universe in their eyes if you look carefully. But as soon as they begin to group, as soon as they begin to clot, when there are 5 of them or 10, or even groups as small as 2, they begin to change. They sacrifice the beauty of the individual for the sake of the group. I decided it was all under the control of groups now, whether it's business, religion, political people, or what, and I would distance myself from wishing for a good outcome. Let it do what it's going to do, and I'll enjoy it as an entertainment.
And I'll reflect on what it is on its own.
And I'll enjoy it for the entertainment. There's a little bit of a sick part in this, too. I root for the big comet. I root for the big asteroid to come and make things right. That's the way I put it.
Stir things up.
Yes, to get us back where we were before the first one came and knocked out these dinosaurs.
Great minds think alike. Patrick was also sharp-witted and had a good sense of humor. A news reporter once wrote a story about when he visited Patrick at Woodstock. He said Pat showed him a place where they sprinkled some of Carlin's ashes just for a bear to come and take a huge dump over the place. Amusingly, when George's daughter was shown this, she said Dad would be very happy, and everybody cracked up. Carlin's early years made us catch a glimpse of his defiant characteristics. At the age of 11, his mother found out that he wrote down swear words that he had from people around the neighborhood. This led her to think that he will need mental help from a psychiatrist. Whether she took him or not, this is a mystery yet to be solved. Moreover, through a mind-blowing event, he was expelled from high school after only 3 semesters. Many might question if this incident was worth expulsion. However, beside the answer to that question, we grasp Carlin's character, not the class clown, but a challenger of authority who just wants to make people laugh, not for money or any gains, but for his own pleasure. The event was a classic prank that he pulled on his classmates. He took materials left over from his art's erasers and placed them in a bag, waved it around, and told his classmates it's heroin. Surprisingly, Carlin also joined the US Air Force. He was a radar technician. This is where his professional career started, as he was able to become a DJ at Shreveport, Louisiana, which was nearby. After a while, he moved to Texas, where he met a fellow DJ, Jack Belt. Together they headed to Hollywood, where they created a show called The Wright Brothers, which eventually attracted the legendary Lenny Bruce. Lenny Bruce is an enormous influence on Carlin. This was evident the day that Lenny Bruce was arrested for obscenity. Lenny Bruce was a stand-up comedian. Throughout his career, he became a social critic and a satirist. He voiced out his opinions on politics, religion, human sexuality, and American culture. This was a time when it was considered a taboo and also illegal to speak about this subject. That is why he is considered as one of the warriors that stood up and fought for freedom of speech in the United States and the whole world. The most significant moment of Lenny Bruce's life was his 1964 arrest, where he was branded a sick comic. It is astonishing and comical how this arrest was connected to George Carlin. First of all, George Carlin's all-time friend from Corpus Christi School was one of the most essential police officers who were involved in the apprehension. During the night of the arrest, everything was as usual. Lenny Bruce was performing his stand-up. Little did he know, the house was infiltrated by undercover cops. To him, they were just a normal audience. However, they were recording him and waiting for him to say something they considered obscene. As Bruce started to perform illegal material, the police stood up and said in a dramatic and Hollywood way, "The show is over, guys." Carlin was present during this arrest. The officer started to demand for people's IDs. Defiantly, George told the police that he doesn't believe in IDs, and without hesitation, the police took him down and arrested him. As if things couldn't get any more interesting, Carlin was taken to the police station inside the same car as the legendary Lenny Bruce. In Carlin's obituary by the New York Times, they deemed him as an heir of Lenny Bruce who gave voice indigent counterculture and assaulted the barricades on behalf of the generation of comics that followed him. Speaking of freedom of speech, George Carlin influenced a court case which is currently taught in law school. The famous routine, 7 dirty words you cannot say on television.
So the words, as I say, shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, tits.
Some critics say that, technically, the word motherfucker is a derivative of the word fuck, so it shouldn't be in the 7 words. But that's how the legend wrote it, and that's how it will go down in history as one of the masterpieces of comedy history. This is a routine that people were and are still fond of. That is the reason why Carlin performed it multiple times. Just like Lenny Bruce, Carlin was also incarcerated in 1972 for performing the 7 dirty words routine at a show in Malawi. The most fascinating fact is that during the performance, he had cocaine in his pocket, so his arrest would have been far worse. Fortunately for him, he was warned by his wife and was able to pass the drugs to the band before getting off stage. Carlin was the first person to host SNL. Initially, SNL wanted the show to be hosted by rotating comics. However, they were unable to get Richard Pryor on board. Even though Carlin was the first host, he said that he doesn't vividly remember hosting the show because he was, and I quote, full of cocaine, just completely boxed. Surprisingly, SNL didn't call him for any of its anniversaries. Carlin says that he thinks it's because he was doing cocaine at the time. Just like Richard Pryor, George had a problem with his heart, and unfortunately, it will be his heart that ends his life. He had 3 heart attacks. His second heart attack happened during a baseball game where he was watching his favorite team, the New York Mets, at Dodger Stadium. After this heart attack, he made this joke on stage. As it stands right now, I lead Richard Pryor in heart attacks 2-1. However, Richard still leads me 1-0 in burning yourself up. It is also worth noting that Carlin had a heart surgery called an angioplasty. The astonishing fact is that it was done by Dr. Andreas Grotenzig, the doctor who invented the procedure. His 14 HBO specials are what live to date. They are his masterpiece, his Mona Lisa. They are still being consumed by millions all over the world and will still be consumed by generations and generations to come. On these specials, we saw the transition from the old Carlin to the modern-day sagacious Carlin that we all know to date. The Carlin of wit, controversy, and bravery, who had no boundaries to what he said. Carlin himself said that in those specials, it was no longer important. In fact, he did not feel the necessity of the audience to laugh, but wanted to spread his message through what he knew best, comedy.
HBO saved my creative, and commercial. The marriage of the two saved me, because my record career had pretty much died down. I had 4 gold records in the early 70s, and you can't be the new hot guy in town forever. So I began to fade and run out of ideas. I drifted a while. HBO came along. In 77, I did my first show for them. They didn't have many subscribers, '78, I did another one, and I was on my way. I've now done 13 of them, and number 14 is coming. And that is what has kept me in front of a mass audience without censorship. I don't mean just fuck, shit, and piss. I mean ideas that would be unwelcome on commercial enterprise television. Because commercials, it's in the word. It's a commercial enterprise. They can't allow you to be upsetting the customers. No. Can you soften that a little? I don't do that.
Carlin's work was not just tongue-in-cheek. It is without doubt that Carlin did not only make us laugh, but also made us think. He is the Martin Luther King of stand-up comedy. In contrast to his clean-cut look that he initially established, Carlin started to grow his hair long, and astonishingly, the longer his hair, the more critical and confrontational his work became. Just like a cobra bite, his words started to sting. Carlin started to cover more topics that were considered to be a taboo. Moreover, like no other comedian, he was aggressively criticizing these matters. He explored religion, politics, race, language, and culture. He paved the road that a vast amount of comedians walked and are still walking as of this minute. Not even the legendary Lenny Bruce could have imagined this kind of content being performed to such a degree. Chris Rock, Bill Burr, Jerry Seinfeld, and Jay Leno are the few who have walked this road. Carlin had a daughter, Kelly Carlin, with his wife. They were a match made in heaven, married for 37 years. However, their relationship was toxic, bad for both of them and their daughter. Carlin's wife was a heavy drinker, and Carlin was a distant father. Kelly had to be the adult in the house. She had to take care of her mother and make sure that she doesn't get into serious trouble because of her drinking. Carlin's childhood experience with a tough and strict mother haunted him throughout his adulthood. He didn't enforce any rule on his daughter. He allowed her to do drugs. Kelly said that it was because of the fear that she might run away, just like the way Carlin used to during his teenage years. Carlin's wife got sober. Unfortunately, the damage due to alcoholism was extreme. She died of liver cancer at the age of 60. Carlin himself had a drug problem. He said that he used drugs to cope with his issues. Everything led to Carlin's daughter to also have a drug problem. Fortunately, she got clean and also wrote a book called Growing Up with George. Carlin was not only a stand-up comic, he was an actor and an author. He was the voice actor of Fillmore in the movie Cars. His most successful book, Brain Droppings, has sold more than 700,000 copies as of January 2001. It also spent 18 weeks on New York Times bestsellers list. Carlin was deemed the second best comedian in the world behind Richard Pryor. He won 6 Grammys and was also the recipient of the 11th Mark Twain Award.